Welcome to Prana Boost Radio. I'm your host, Tina Louise Bellotti.
And I'm Alan Bellotti.
I'm Isabella Sarah Bellotti. And I'm Gabrielle Letzo Bellotti.
Niyarka is the founder and CEO of Niyarka Inc. She's the creator and author of Supreme Influence. She is a world-class keynote speaker. Niyarka has been leading transformation for more than 15 years. Her work has impacted the lives of tens of thousands of people in over 30 countries. With love, Niyarka guides her students to transform limitations, clarify direction, and embody their true power. She gives you tools, techniques, and daily practices to achieve goals and bring forth your infinite potential so you powerfully contribute to co-creating a sustainable, prosperous, and harmonious world for all. In her courses, you enter an integral learning environment for accelerated, lasting change that'll elevate how you think, speak, and live. Prior to launching her company in 2000, Niyarka was the top trainer for Anthony Robbins, the world-renowned transformational and motivational genius, for 5 years. Prior to working with Robbins, Niyarka promoted events across the United States for Brian Tracy. Hi Prana Boosters! Today's featured guest Prana Booster is the creator and author of Supreme Influence, Niyarka. Hi Niyarka!
Hi! I'm happy to be here with you.
So happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here on Prana Boost Radio. We're so grateful to have you here with us to share time and space, and it's so wonderful to connect with you.
I'm excited to be here with you too.
I'm excited to talk about one of my favorite topics, something very close to my heart. My greatest passion has been mindful language. I don't know what cooler word, to words could describe it or something. Maybe it doesn't sound that exciting, but just fascinated with language and communication. So it's really special that you're here for me today.
Absolutely. I'm passionate about language too. So
I know you are. I attended your one-day event in LA last year, and it was so transformational for me. And one of the biggest impacts that it had on me was that I kind of knew a lot of what you were talking about, but I didn't necessarily have the verbiage or the correct understanding or sometimes how to implement it. And so it really opened me up. I was taking notes, and I was like, oh my God, that's so good. And it was just wonderful that you offer those events for people to be introduced to, Supreme Influence and what it is that you teach and empower everybody with. So I wanted to tell you, I've been extra sensitive to language pretty much my whole life, and I knew our words have been so powerful. And when it really affected me, and I think I became really awakened, something within me was when I got pregnant with my first daughter, which was 12 years ago. And I had this epiphany, I heard a voice. And I knew that it was time to go deeper, and I knew that what we said and what we thought really mattered. So even though I might have knew about it before, I didn't really feel it and I didn't understand it. And basically I was feeling like my baby could feel, hear, and think everything that I was hearing and thinking. And if we were so connected to share food, we may have been connected in the thought process and the feelings and emotions. So I really had no idea that this would be part of me aligning with my higher purpose. But then to have your book touches on everything that I have been thinking and feeling, and it's really a validation and confirmation of everything that that I have been experiencing over the last 12 years of being a mom and teaching other people how to speak and communicate. So I wonder if you can describe for our audience what exactly Supreme Influence is.
Absolutely. And before I even go into that, I love that you share about your consciousness and how you were communicating while you're pregnant. That's a big through line in this. I mean, imagine if every single person was that aware and that purposeful in their language, the ripple effect that would have. So Supreme Influence is a way of being. It's a way of communicating at our highest level of excellence. And the word supreme refers to the empowered, authentic you. It's our union with supreme intelligence. And then how we bring that unique essence that each one of us has, because each one of us has something that is unique, that is rare, that has never been. and how we bring that into manifestation through our own unique gifts in a way that creates value in the world and beauty and prosperity is what I call real influence. And as I define it, it's inward fluency. So it's when your thoughts and your words and your beliefs and your core values and your sense of self and your actions are all in alignment. And when you're living a life that's congruent in that fashion, you have power, real power, which is inner power. It's not power over any person or thing, because that external idea of power is really fear masked in the illusion of power. So it's the internal kind of power that needs nothing because it knows that you are it. So when we live our lives in this way, we're able to create harmonious relationships, to cooperate, and to produce successful results in our relationships, in our business ventures, and in all areas of our lives.
I love that. It's so beautifully stated, and it so amazingly describes how I have felt about being a parent, because honestly, I think we have the most powerful influence over our children, and we do not understand. Typically, we're not trained or anything. I always talk about this in my workshops and everything. We're not trained. We're trained to do diapers, and we're trained to actually care for the physical needs of a child, but not really the emotional needs or what communication might look like. And I always talk about what does it look like to have influence as a parent or as a human being in the world, rather than fear-based mentality when you're communicating with somebody, trying to get your needs expressed and trying to teach or inspire somebody. So most of the time we don't come from that place. So that's been a really big, huge focus for me and in our family. And so my youngest is kind of like me. We're like the mindful language police. One day my oldest said, "Can I please just have a day where I just speak despicably?" Because they like this movie Despicable Me. And she's like, "Can I just say everything, that you guys are like not wanting me to say?" And it's funny because we became so mindful that my youngest has this, saying where she walks around saying, "Say what you do want," because, it's really big. Because when everybody does it, but I relate it to parenting because that's where I'm at right now. But, we tell kids, don't run and don't make noise and don't do this and don't do that. And early on, my kids wouldn't even let me say that. They weren't even comfortable with that. So early on, we would say, we would tell them what we really wanted. Please walk. Or, I have a big...
Just to draw a little distinction on that, because it's such an amazing point, is that the mind cannot negate. So when we say to a child, don't run with the scissors, in order for the child to conceptualize not running with the scissors, they have to actually have the experience of running with the scissors first to then negate it. So a much more effective approach would be telling them what to do rather than telling them what not to do. And this ties into, one of the things that psychologists talk about, which is that most psychologists agree that that an average child has received about over 20,000 hours of linguistic programming by the time they're 8 years old. So these are words that are downloaded into our minds, imprinting our minds with ideas about God, ideas about money, ideas about marriage, ideas about who we are and what is or isn't possible. And these ideas run in a person's mind like tape loops, and they will drive their behavior until they wake up. So it's beautiful to see and to witness you bringing that conversation at right from the get-go.
And we do all the time, because if we start to say I don't want to, somebody will say well, what do you want? Because they'll be like, I don't want to be late. And we catch ourselves, we have that awareness. It's not that we don't slip up. It's not that we don't sometimes say what we don't want or something like that, but we have such high awareness, it's extra heightened because we focus on it, and then we'll say I really want to be on time. It feels so good to be on time, and it feels so nice not to rush, and it changes our whole demeanor, and then it changes our whole relationship with each other of how we, because everything else is very anxiety based, and when it's fear based, everybody's uncomfortable, people start yelling, things like that. So I know that there's a saying, when mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. So I am sort of the ringleader of that. I am the, spearheading that campaign of mindful language, but everybody enjoys it. And the way I know they enjoy it is sometimes we watch, we'll be watching Food Network, and they'll hear it, it'll be a competition-based show, which brings a lot of anxiety, and my kids are muting it, and they're like, ooh, like, you know, they're reacting, because like, ooh, that didn't sound good. They're what they say is high vibe or low vibe. They're like, ooh, that was low vibe. You know, that didn't feel good. So they have this awareness around how people speak at a very young age, which I think is really empowering and really great for our world.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
and to be playful with it. Like you said, the times that you slip up, you can just be playful with it and have fun with it. Then it just creates movement, where a lot of times where families get stuck is things get very rigid. And it's like, don't do this and don't do that. And then the child is like, oh my goodness, I can't do anything. So just to make it playful and fun, and it becomes a coaching and a learning opportunity.
It becomes like coaching, yeah. And, you know, we don't do anything like rewards or, you know, bribes or, you know, things like that, like, you know, bad word jars or anything. We don't do anything like that. We just help each other. And, you know, when they were little, sometimes they would catch me and they would be like, oh, Mom, you're not being conscious. And I would be like, oh my God, you're right. So we're not hard on each other, and we're not looking to criticize. We're just looking to each help each other, you know, recognize it. So on page 8 in your book, you share about your experience of reading and wanting to become a person of influence at a very young age, actually, as you learned that you could create with words. Can you share a little bit more about that with us?
Oh, sure. You know, I was always intrigued at how two people can make a similar request and one person gets an absolute no response, and the other person would get a enthusiastic, cooperative response based on a similar request. So I became very intrigued at what is it that inspires people to want to work together, and what is it that inspires action. And it became very important to me at a young age to become a person of influence, to be able to be someone who can walk into a room, and if there was a dense, you talked about energy earlier, like a dense energy, to be able to be the influencing factor that can shift the vibration of a space. And what do I mean by that? Let's say that you walk into a place and there's anger, or there's a upset type of a vibration in the room, that you can be the light unto that dark energy, if you would, that you can walk in and be a harmonizing factor, that you could be a stabilizing factor, that you could bring in the possibility in the midst of what others perceive as problems. And that became something at an early age that I saw a lot of value in. You know, I looked out into the world and saw all this conflict at the level of nations, at the level of organizations, at the level of families. And it was like, what if each person could be that influencing factor in the most empowering way that honors everybody in the space? And I became very intrigued by what that means and what that would look like. And then I imagined what it would be like to have leaders being committed to become a person of influence. And what I mean by that level of influence is not that you're trying to get someone else to see your point of view, which I see as an old idea of influence, but rather you're so aligned and so in your purpose and so in your authenticity and in your power that you become like a tuning fork. Right. And that as that tuning fork, others want to collaborate with you, want to understand more, and want to effectively communicate.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what's really helped us as a family, you know, it's not very common. It's not something I really hear about, but we actually have like core values that are for our family that, you know,
I love that. I love that you have core values for your family. That's so essential, because that creates alignment and clarity and decision making and congruency. Tell me about that.
Well, it's amazing because it helps us always come back to it, because if we stray, we can always come back because we have that core value. And so, like, my girls are little, you know, they're 9 and 11. That's so, well, they're getting bigger and they're getting very tall. But it's amazing because you have that foundation and you can go back to it. So it's not about any type of perfection, but it's about knowing, like, well, what's our goal here? So, like, one of our core values has always been peace and nonviolence. And I love the word ahimsa, which is Sanskrit for nonviolence. And so just to tell our audience, ahimsa means not to injure. And it describes language that does not harm someone while speaking it. And it says, Gandhi believed in ahimsa and taught that it applies to all living beings, including all animals. Ahimsa is rooted in the belief that all living beings have the spark of the divine spiritual energy. Therefore, to hurt another being is to hurt oneself. And early on, kids know that too. I mean, they kind of know if they went too far, if they said something that was kind of hurtful, or they said something they didn't mean, or they want to take it back and they say, oh, that's not what I meant. Once they see somebody's reaction or how they feel, they are sometimes aware, right, of what they're saying, but they're not really taught to keep looking at that and what does that look like. So I've noticed, I've been with my husband for this year 21 years.
Oh.
And we've had we've had such a shift in our communication from when we met. And I love your story in your book, how you both describe one day what a trip might be like on the Titanic. And I want you to tell us a little bit more about that, but I was going to just relate it. I have a story. Just recently, it just happened. I was playing this beautiful classical music. I thought it was like wonderful on on Pandora. And my husband walks in and I'm like, oh, it's so relaxing. Isn't it so nice? And he's like, it sounds like a mafia movie, like somebody's about to be taken out. Like he had such a different, trigger and relationship to that music, what it meant for him. I don't know what he was watching. But tell us more about that story about the Titanic, how you can both be talking about the same topic and each coming from a way different perspective.
Sure. That's an interesting story. And it's based on the premise that people don't respond to reality. They respond to their map of reality. And they respond to their map of reality until they wake up. And that's why it's important for us to have compassion and why it's important for us to honor the other person's map and to ask questions and to seek to understand. So the story was a funny example of a time that I had been asked to speak on a cruise. And I hadn't been on a cruise since I was a child. And I had just finished watching the movie Titanic. So I had this vision of what it would be like to be on a cruise, and I literally saw myself in my mind standing at the top of this big, splendid staircase in my beautiful gown, looking down at my boyfriend who was at the bottom of the staircase in his finest tux. And at the time, while I'm having this vision, I'm packing my bags with my boyfriend at the time, and I looked at him and I said, honey, this cruise is going to be so amazing. It's going to be just like the Titanic. And he just stopped and he looked at me in horror and he says, what are you talking about? He says, I don't want to go to cruise if it's like the Titanic.
Right.
And I was like, what did you say, the movie? And he said, well, yeah, everybody died.
Right.
And it was just this moment where we caught ourselves and we just had a moment of laughter because in my mind, that word Titanic conjured images of romance and elegance and this soulmate love based on my association in that moment of the movie I had just seen. And in his mind, that same word, Titanic, conjured up a totally different, what we call in NLP or neurolinguistic programming, it conjured up a different internal representation. In other words, he had different pictures, sounds, and feelings in his mind when he thought about that same word. And if we wouldn't have been present and playful and just willing to communicate, you can imagine someone in the absence of that awareness and in the absence of supreme influence, a misunderstanding like this could escalate into something that has nothing to do with what's even happening. I mean, how many times do you see people reacting to another person based on what's coming up for them in the presence of a conversation, not even really based on what's happening? So that's why it's important for us to ask more questions. And one of my favorite questions to ask is, sweetheart, how do you mean? How so? Tell me more. Can you share with me a little bit more about what you're thinking when you say that? And by asking that question, it allows, I mean, in that moment, if my boyfriend would have asked me that, it would have allowed me to reveal more of my fantasy.
Right. No, absolutely. And I love asking questions. And I love the questions that you actually suggest we use. And sometimes I just say, how can I help? Like, what does that look like for you? Just so that they could tell me because, with little kids, we're used to taking care of their every need and assuming, right? We have to assume until they get to a certain age what they need. And so when they get older and we start doing that, my kids were like 4 and 6 going, Mommy, you assumed I needed help. I don't need help. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, we without asking questions, we really can't communicate without asking questions, actually.
And I love that. I love you asking questions to your children from the time they're little, because I see a lot of times parents that don't do that. They assume that they know what's best without realizing that there's a consciousness in there and there's brilliance in there. And how can we really be present to our children and ask them these questions? I mean, recently, I was sharing with you when we got on the Skype, we recently had our youngest graduate of my advanced course. It's a 5-day course on advanced communication skills and evolved neuro-linguistic programming. And we just had an 11-year-old graduate, and he was amazing. And he was so present, so curious, had so many questions. And his mom, who is this brilliant woman who was the one who brought her whole family there after going through her own personal breakthroughs, it was interesting to see her experience in the class with him. Because right from the gate, his hand was raised and he was like, I have questions, pick on me, pick on me. And in the beginning, she was like, stop it, you're disrupting, like, be quiet, like, just listen. And she was trying to control how he was showing up. And I asked her during one of the breaks, I said, have you just asked him, how you feeling? And she goes, wow, no, I haven't. She said, I just have been trying to get him to show up a certain way or to not do things or to do things. But to really be present the way you're talking about from the time they're just little, and to be able to have these elevated conversations with them rather than just assuming that you know, is really a key to raising very aware and very conscious children.
Thank you. Yes, that's beautiful, and that's amazing that you had that experience. And I think honestly, I think more and more younger people would be open to learning about it. It's very odd to me that it's not taught, but it's not mainstream. It's not really completely mainstream. I mean, I have a degree in communications, and I didn't learn any of this stuff in school. I didn't really learn anything about communicating in a way that felt good, in a way that felt, that brought peace, and in a way that felt good to both parties. And, I remember growing up, I wrote an article about this. Everybody used to say, you're wrong, and, it's your perception, and your perception is off. And I kept saying, but how can that be? Like, this is my perception. And it was just sort of a battle between people's different realities, and not understanding that everybody could have their own reality and their own, perception. For us, we're really big on talking things through and communicating. And so, like, when I teach parents, I teach them to believe, so everybody's like, they're talking back or they're being disrespectful when you have children, right? And a lot of times that happens out in the world too. A waitress they feel wasn't nice or was disrespectful or something like that. And I listen for the emotion behind the behavior, and I teach parents to say, instead of saying, why is my child speaking to me that way? The question would be, why is my child feeling that way? So they're actually like inquiring about it instead of being offended by it, so that they can then assist them in growing, which I thought was the job of the parent, right?
Very insightful. It's so important. Seek to understand. Ask more questions.
Seek to understand. I love that.
Look for the energy. I love what you're saying. Look for the energy beneath the words.
Right. Because if you see somebody who's in distress, they need help. They don't need you to punish them for being in distress. They need to find their way back to that place of love and alignment. So I wanted to ask you, many people want to create change and upgrade their lives, yet they do not make any changes in their thoughts and in their actions of their language. And you say every moment contains a seed of enormous potential, but if someone chooses today, as he did yesterday, without awareness, he can recreate the past and project it into the present. Of course, it's okay to choose the same thing. The question is, are we choosing from a space of unconscious habit, or are we choosing consciously in alignment with our purpose? When we choose with awareness, we are empowered. So can you explain some of the most important positive benefits of learning about the power, of our words and our language?
Yes. There's many benefits. One of them is that we create as we speak. Every statement that we make, every question that we ask contains presuppositions. And presuppositions are embedded assumptions in language that actually trigger our brain and signal our brain to find things that are in alignment with what we're declaring. So one of the things that I share to my students is, when you open your mouth to speak, how many possibilities are there of what you could say? infinite, right? There's limitless ways to describe the human experience. Well, the words that we choose, either consciously or subconsciously, they do two things. One is they shape our experience of reality, and they reveal the dominating thoughts of our mind to a discerning listener. So as we begin to become purposeful with our language, and I don't mean like silly positive thinking, I don't mean like you stand in front of your garden and you go, well, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, there's no weeds, or you just stand in front of the mirror and you go, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. I don't mean like some silly affirmations, and affirmations can work if you authentically, congruently believe what you're saying. Right. But if somebody says something and then inside there's an incongruence about that, that affirmation can actually has the potential to do more harm than good. But it's to become mindful of your language. I love how you use the word mindful, because that's what it is. It's becoming so present with your language, and then holding yourself to a higher standard. Really holding yourself to a higher standard of what is my highest intention here, and how can I speak into existence that which is in alignment with what I'm committed to create. Obviously, we're not committed to continue to talk about the problem. You want to understand the problem, but you want to be able to frame your language in a way that moves towards possibility and solution.
Right, absolutely. And the benefits are a more peaceful existence. I mean,
totally.
better relationships, more money, because you're having more success,
greater health
better
in your
health.
body. You're going to feel better in your body, because as you communicate with yourself more effectively, you make healthier choices.
Right.
You're going to have more peace and harmony in your relationships. You're going to have a juicier love and romance in your intimate relationship with your partner, because you're going to come in and you're going to be able to be playful and connected in your language. You're going to be able to be more effective in your ability to negotiate business deals in a way that creates win-win situations for everybody involved. You're going to be more effective in communicating your vision into existence in a way that inspires other people to be a part of it, because they go, man, whatever she's vibing on, I want some of that, because that's what I'm about in my life. So you're going to become a leader. It's going to give you the resources to become a leader, so you authentically embody your gift and bring it into the world in a way that creates products or services or something that makes the world a better place because of you. That's how important it is, and that's just the beginning of the benefits.
Yes, I love that. And you feel better because you don't even realize, well, I don't want to say you, okay, sometimes we don't realize the effect we have. So it's interesting, my dad had an injury to his leg, and he was beating himself up about it. And when he would talk to himself, I would say, Dad, I had to say it in this way because this is the way that he could hear it at that moment. But I said, would you ever talk to the girls like that? Meaning his grandchildren, right? I said, if they fell or they hurt themselves, or would you ever say what you're saying right now to them? And he's like, oh my God, no. And I said, but you're just as special. Like, why are you saying it to yourself? And we worked on his language and what he said. And I wasn't trying to do it, to preach or anything like that. I was really trying to help him through a really rough time. And I just said, if you can give yourself a little more love and forgive yourself for the fact that the injury occurred, then you can heal. And isn't that what you want? You really want to heal? And so, oh my God, I mean, he was amazing. I mean, he healed. His doctor couldn't believe it. He wasn't sure. It could have gone another way, I mean, some people told him he wouldn't walk again. Things like, the power of the mind and what we say. He didn't realize that he needed to do that for himself as well. And it was magical. It was really, really beautiful. So I wanted to ask you about another really cool thing about visualization. I love the power of visualization. And in your book, you describe being very young and sitting in the car that you got from your father, pretending to journey off to a far off exotic land, traveling the world. And by the age of 24, you were doing exactly that. At that time, were you aware that you created that?
I was aware that something needed to change and that I had power to change it. And I was in the initial stages of becoming aware of the power of visualization. I knew that there was something there because my life started quickly changing shortly thereafter. I mean, I started envisioning that, and by the time I was 24, I was already about to depart working for Tony Robbins that I had already been doing for 5 years.
Wow.
So, by the time I was 19, I was already traveling across the country, living a lot of the things that I was initially envisioning in those early years. But yes, it's that we live in a universe that is energy, and everything that we experience and we see and we touch and we feel all began as thought. It all began in the realm of thought. So as we can begin to see the results that we're inspired and committed to create and advance in our mind's eye without attachment, that's the key thing. A lot of times people get tunnel vision, like, oh, I want this particular person to be in a relationship with me, or I want this particular job, or I want this particular thing, and you lose your power because that attachment presupposes absence, which creates lack, which eliminates your power. So when you can be very clear and specific in the abstract of what is the essence of that which you're inspired and committed to create, and you can see it and feel it and experience it is already done in the level of consciousness, then there's a short gap between that moment of internal creation and manifestation. You got to be free of attachment. You got to be free of the lust of result.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's so powerful because, we live in a world where people are learning now about the law of attraction and watching The Secret and all sorts of stuff, and people are very attached to the outcome and the result. And I love that what did you say? Can you repeat? Can you even repeat that? No, I love what you said about I love what you say about the abstract.
Oh, yes. I teach this at a course that I do once a year called The Science of Achieving Big Goals. And I guide people over a 2-day period of how do you achieve, or how do you manifest, or how do you materialize any specific big goal in your life. And part of that is you've got to be able to see, hear, and feel it in your mind's eye, but it's got to be specific in the abstract. It can't be too specific because you get tunnel vision and you eliminate the possibility of the universe bringing it to you in ways that are even more magnificent than you could have even imagined. So yes, it's being specific in the abstract and becoming crystal clear without lust for result.
I like that. That is so beautiful. That's a really good way to explain it. So another story that I really, really enjoyed from your book was the story, it's interesting, I had heard this story from my mom before, something similar to this story. The story about the pot roast and the little girl cooking the pot roast. And I'll explain, I'll go in a little more, or maybe you want to explain it to us. But, we gave our children, I think because we started doing it, we gave our children permission to question everything. Everything. Because we told them everything is based on how you feel. And if it doesn't feel good and it doesn't resonate with you, there's a reason for that. That's guidance. And it's telling you something. So, I love here, because we chose not to blindly follow traditions or lifestyles or anything if they didn't feel good to us, while gently allowing everyone else to do it, do it their way so that they could enjoy what felt good to them. But do you want to tell that story about the pot roast? The little girl, do you remember it?
I do. I'm not remembering where I heard that story for the first time.
Good.
But it's a great story where a little girl goes to her mom and says, "Mom, why do we cut the ends off the pot roast?" Because she would see her mom always cutting the ends off the pot roast before putting it in the oven. And the mom says, "I don't know, honey, that's the way Grandma always did it. Go ask Grandma." So the little girl goes to Grandma and says, "Grandma, why do we always cut the ends off the pot roast before we put it in the oven?" And her grandma says, "That's a really great question. I don't know. When I was a little girl about your age, that's what great-grandma always did. Go ask great-grandma." Well, fortunately, great-grandma was there, and the little girl went to great-grandma and said, "Great-grandma, why do you always cut the ends off the pot roast before you put it in the oven?" And the great-grandma said, "Well, because when I was a little girl like you, the oven was too small, so we cut the ends off to make sure that it would fit."
Right.
And it's like, okay, here we are 3 generations later, and the ends are still being cut off the pot roast. And why isn't anybody asking, why are we eating pot roast in the first place when we have all these other choices and options that are much healthier for our brains and for our bodies? So it's having a mental update. I love that you have inspired your children to question things. Just recently, we have a page that's exclusive for the graduates of our courses, and one of the students that's a graduate wrote on that page that he was sitting at a Starbucks, and there was a little girl that was asking her mom all these questions, and the mom scolded her and said to her, "Stop asking so many questions. Stop asking so many questions. I can't answer all of your questions." So, for us to be able to have the awareness and the love and the ability to be able to inspire all of our children, not just our own children,
Right.
but the world's children,
Right.
to ask their questions, to be curious. I mean, Einstein said that the most important thing was to not stop questioning.
Yes.
The importance of curiosity.
Yes. But, you know, many times we associate asking questions with pain, because we get somebody who doesn't want to respond, or we do get scolded, or somebody says, don't ask, you know, just do it, or something like that, you know. So, well, and, you know, I just felt that I didn't want to blindly follow anything. So we kind of have this favorite quote, which is, just because it is doesn't mean it should be. Mm-hmm. And I understand those moms, because it's hard, especially the more kids you have. I have two, and if we fall asleep at night and they're still talking and I'm so tired, they're asking questions and asking questions, and what is cotton made of, and how come they use it for shirts, and, you know, so, one time I remember yelling at them. I said, stop asking me, I'm not Siri. I'm like, if you want to ask Siri, you know, on the iPhone. I was like, but I always say, sometimes I don't know. I say, let's Google it. Let's look together. Let's find out. I'm not exactly sure either.
See, that's brilliant, to empower them to find their own answers, not just expect the answers to come from you or from some particular source. To empower them, hey, that's a great question. And you know what? The answers are out there, or you have the power to find them yourself. Let's look at how we can do that. Yeah,
and they watch us do that. You know, if we don't know something, we look it up, or if we don't know something, we talk to somebody, so they're seeing us do that. I know a lot of people are sometimes, you know, just they're trained to be kind of fearful to ask for help, or ask a question, or inquire more. And so I think it's so wonderful to keep getting this information out. That's why I was so excited to talk to you today, and so excited to share your book with the world, and just to retrain people's brains to understand that it's a beautiful, wonderful thing to question. So I wanted to ask you, I know you come from a Cuban family, a Cuban background. Have you decided for yourself not to blindly follow any, you know, traditions or lifestyle choices, such as, you know, like food or meals? Has there been things that you've shifted away from that it was kind of hard to do for you and your family?
Yeah, I shifted away from it. I wouldn't say it was hard to do for me, because I was just clear on that there were certain things that I grew up with that just were not in alignment with what was most essential to me and how I wanted to live my life. I mean, one of them is releasing meat. I mean, I grew up in a very meat-heavy culture. But it's like it's where you come to appreciate the things that you've received from your family, and you come into an awareness of having the compassion to love all of it, and then the awareness to recognize what works for you and what doesn't, and then the courage to make those choices.
Yeah.
So,
and it's challenging nowadays with so many different foods and so many different things. The four of us are vegan, and when we went vegan, first we went vegetarian, and we went, our kids wouldn't eat animals. They just would not eat animals, and they understand the connection with the animal. And it was very challenging for us to work through that with our families. But everybody's pretty wonderful about it now. It's been, you know, it's been a few years and everything like that. But it can be challenging, but it's important to follow your heart like that. So
I had a funny experience when we were in Miami recently. We did a one-day event in Fort Lauderdale, and then we all went out to eat afterwards. And I was taking the family out to a Cuban restaurant. So I wanted to make sure they had something vegetarian on the menu. So I'm looking, and I said to the guy, do you have anything vegetarian? And he says, yeah, we have chicken.
Right. Or they offer fish or scrambled eggs or something. Yeah.
Anyways, it was interesting. So I said, I'm going to love you through it.
I'm gonna love you through it. Now please feed me something that's not any meat. I would love to talk about the reticular activating system. I love this.
Yes.
The structure in the human brainstem that alerts you of important information and tells you what to notice. I never knew what to call it, so I love that you gave that a name for me. You mentioned an example of seeing a car very frequently after you had just purchased your car because you've been so focused on it. For us, we had this experience because my husband and I both have dark hair, and we gave birth to 2 redheads. So everywhere we go, and it's also because there's 2 of them, I think that they get especially noticed. But I tell them that I believe it's their essence and their energy that gets them noticed as well. But part of it is that physical strikingness of having that red hair, and everybody would say, oh my God, it's so crazy. How do they have red hair? It's so rare. And I would be like, rare? What are you talking about? Like, we see redheads everywhere we go. Because we were so focused on it. It was in our awareness. So, you know, we were learning that what you focus on expands, and I was wondering if, how can we use this to our advantage? Like, how can we program our RAS to focus, you know, on our visions that we would like to expand on?
That's a great question, because yes, the reticular activating system does sort through a universe of infinite possibilities. It's a part of your brain that literally sorts through the realm of infinite possibilities and finds and attracts things that are in harmony with the dominating thoughts of your mind. So one of the things that we can do is we can ask questions that presuppose that which is in alignment with what we want to attract. So beginning to speak into existence, you know, let's say one of the questions that I teach in my one-day Supreme Influence event is how to ask a question like, how can I be even more aware of the unlimited opportunities that surround me right now?
I love that.
So if someone says, okay, well, how can I be even more aware of the unlimited opportunities that are surrounding me right now? That question is presupposing that there's unlimited opportunities and that they're surrounding you, and it's triggering your brain to go find things that are in alignment with that declaration. Now, if someone else says, gosh, you know, why are so many people struggling right now in this marketplace? And they ask a question like that, why are so many people struggling? That's going to trigger the reticular activating system to sort through infinite possibilities and find examples of struggling. Right. It's all available. So it becomes so purposeful with what are the questions that you're asking yourself. What are the things that you are literally speaking into existence? I mean, I did a talk not too long ago with Deepak Chopra, and we were talking backstage, and he was sharing with me how the cells in the body are literally eavesdropping on your internal dialogue. So your cells are eavesdropping on this conversation that you're having. The quality of your life is reflecting the quality of your conversations, and the reticular activating system is on alert to go find things that are in alignment with what you are literally speaking into the space. So this is good news, because it means that as we elevate our communication, we elevate our entire experience of reality.
Yes, that is so beautiful. And I love how you say that, because I think if people can understand that our brain is like a computer system, and you know, we upgrade our computers, we upgrade our phones, we upgrade our clothes and our closets, and we upgrade so many parts of our life, for them to learn that upgrading this, right?
Software upgrade to the brain.
Yeah, software upgrade. It just requires an upgrade. Oh, you need an update, or maybe you need a reboot. You just got to restart it, or you need a reboot. And what's a better way to think about that, you know? Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful.
And that ties into what I do in my advanced courses and my live courses, because that's really my specialty, is guiding and leading live transformation. So it's like someone could be having a habit that they've been doing that doesn't serve them, and they keep running this habit. Well, what's happening is it's almost like a record. You remember those old records? Yeah. They used to have the grooves in them with a little needle, and you put the needle on the record. They don't have those anymore now in our digital age, but those records had these grooves, and they would play the same way over and over and over again. Well, before you could put a new record in, it's important to have the tools and the resources to take that old record out. And that's what we do in our live courses. We guide people to take those old records out so you can put something new in that's in alignment with who you really are at a soul level.
Right, and it's very powerful to understand that if something's not going right, that there is a place where you can go to look inside and figure out what kind of shift could be made, that you have the power to transform that. So the fact that you teach that and you immerse them in that information is so essential.
I remember years ago, Tony Robbins used to say to me, when I first started working with them, and I was like 19 years old, I remember he would say that if something's off or it's not going right, that it's only a sign or a signal to change your perception or your procedure, one of the two. So it's like, okay, is it my perception that's off here or my procedure? And that always stuck with me as an insight.
I like that. I can't imagine that. What is it like to be in the presence of Tony Robbins? Both of you are so powerful and knowledgeable about this, you know, subconscious work and everything like that. What is it like to be the two?
It was amazing. It was amazing to work with him. I mean, I traveled with him for 5 years. I lived in 16 different cities over a 5-year period.
Wow.
And he is definitely intense and passionate and phenomenal at guiding live transformation. So for me, it was so powerful to see him and to witness the breakthroughs that happened in that seminar space. And in that moment, I knew for me what my purpose was. So it was definitely a very blessed time, to say the least.
Definitely divine, right?
Huh?
It was definitely divine.
It was you know, there's times in my life where I look back and I know that I was guided, and that I was definitely on purpose in a particular trajectory. And meeting and working with Tony Robbins was one of those experiences.
That's wonderful. I love your empowering questions that you talk about, and I was taking some notes as I read your book. And you were talking about some questions that you could ask before heading into a meeting with somebody. So the question becoming, and all of these are very positive, beautiful, inspiring questions. How may I serve?
Yes.
Right? These are without ego. What is my ultimate outcome for this meeting? I mean, I really, that's rare that I think somebody would think in these ways and ask like that. How specifically will I know when I achieve it? So, sometimes we all make goals, but how will we recognize that goal when we get to it? So asking that question can help us.
That's so important, what you just shared right there. I call it an evidence procedure. A lot of times people say they want something, but they don't know what specifically has to happen in order for them to achieve it. So I literally will say, what do you have to see? What do you have to feel? What has to happen in order for you to know that that's been achieved or that that's happened?
Which is important, because how many times did we sometimes really, really focus on something that we wanted, and then we got it, and we're like, what? We're like, is this really what I wanted? This doesn't look like what I thought.
That's why the core values are so important. Your core
Right.
values conversation. Because then you make decisions based on the core values, and you don't end up making decisions and wind up at a place where you go, this isn't in alignment with who I really am and what's most important to me. So the core value stems from an empowering question.
Right.
And the empowering question is, what's most important to me in my life? And until someone can effectively answer that question, what is most important to you in your life, you're going to live a life of reaction to other people's demands,
Yes.
to things that you perceive to be painful that you want to move away from, or things that you perceive to be pleasurable that you want to move towards. You'll live a life of reaction until you can authentically answer that one most essential question. What's most important to you in your life?
Right. And I'm actually writing my first book right now. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And one of the concepts that I try to instill in people is, more than, a lot of people try to decide if they want to have a family and how many kids they want to have and what they're going to do. And I teach people to kind of feel their way through situations, and feel their way through parenting, and feel their way and learn how to use their intuition to guide them. And I teach people to create a vision for their family, and what that might look like and what that might feel like, so they can create that and recognize it. And I remember at your event, I loved the story that you were sharing about a realtor, who was talking to a man. I don't remember if it was a man or a woman, but who was talking to a man, and the man was saying, I really want a home that feels zen. Right, which could be interpreted in so many different ways, right? Like you say, infinite possibilities. And you describe the best way to understand what someone means or needs is to ask questions and be, curious. And so I was wondering if you could give us some examples of questions that would lead us to understanding this man's need for a home that was zen. What does that look like?
Sure. And this is so important to not assume. Earlier
Right.
you were talking about assuming. It's
Right.
so important.
You're like, here's your one Buddha. It's zen.
I know, because sometimes you might have a person who assumes, I know what you mean by zen. I just saw this house that was zen. It had waterfalls and the Buddha or whatever. And then they start speaking into that person's request prior to eliciting the information to give a full perspective on what that person actually really desires. So before you assume, ask questions. So if the person says zen, I would say, okay, well, wonderful. Zen sounds great. How so? I mean, it could literally be as simple as that. How so? How do you mean? How will you know when a house is zen? First I start with how so, because it's small enough question to get them to expand bigger. How do you mean? What specifically has to happen for you to know that it's zen? Is it something that you see? Is it something that you hear? Is it something that you feel? What happens that lets you know something is zen? When was the last time you experienced zen? Describe that for me. And then begin to ask questions that elicit their map for zen. And that'll make your job so much easier. And it's almost like when you meet someone for the first time and they say, well, oh, what do you do? And you say, oh, well, I'm a coach. And they go, oh, I know all about that. Well, how can you know all about a coach? There's infinite different directions that a coach can be. So the second that someone assumes, there's a great quote. I think it's William Blake, but I'm not remembering whose quote it is off the top of my head in the moment. But it talks about the biggest obstacle to discovery and that the biggest obstacle to discovery isn't ignorance. It's the illusion of knowledge. That the moment that you think you know, it's that you cut off. So in that example, you don't know what that person necessarily means by Zen. And even if you did, you still want to ask more questions. So here's the best question. How so? How do you mean? How specifically? What specifically? What will you see? What will you hear? What will you feel? Paint a picture for me.
I think that would shift all of humanity to be able to ask questions like that. When you talk about, you know, dinner, or what somebody says, like, my birthday's coming up, right? And everybody has a different idea of what a birthday could be, or what does a celebration look like? And there's infinite possibilities to all of those answers. So if you
and then we can really have some fun with that, because when someone says, oh, I have a birthday coming up, now something I teach in my advanced courses to spice things up is some people communicate more inferentially, where others communicate more literally. So what do I mean by that? Some people will literally tell you it's my birthday and this is what I want to do. Right. Others will kind of drop hints and hope that you figure it out.
Right.
So it's important to have the awareness and the skill to be able to understand where someone's coming from, speak into their listening to create the greatest results for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. If you're like my kids, they will have a step-by-step list and a blueprint and an exact, you know, outline of what their birthday should look like and what they want to do and what they want to feel like and what they want to eat. So it's funny. Kids are really good at that. That's why I think if we get them at a young age, I know that we'll be empowering them. You know, it's hard for us. Like, I mean, I'm 41. So I think it's sometimes it's more challenging in an older age to basically, you know, I've had to unlearn everything that I thought I knew and everything that I thought was working for me or felt good or was right in the world. And to be able to do that, to be able to question it. But kids are easier, you know, they're easier to help them, you know, grow and cultivate this type of thinking from a younger age. So I think that's really beautiful. And I love that you said you had your youngest attendee who was 11. So I did have a question. What is your best advice for people who want to really tune in to their intuition and find their authentic voice and then learn how to communicate with influence?
Oh my goodness, my best advice. I have a few things.
Okay.
I would say one is it's essential to have some form of spiritual practice or some form of meditation or something that works for you to be able to come into a place of stillness. And that is so important because there's so much noise beaming at us all day long in so many different directions that if you don't have a practice to bring yourself into a place of stillness, then you're going to be swayed by other people's ideas and you're going to have a difficult time tapping into your intuitive wisdom. So one is your spiritual practice, and from that is your daily practices. What are the rituals that you have in place that ground you into your center? And some of those rituals become your way of life. One of the things that you mentioned was ahimsa and non-violence. That becomes a way of life. So when somebody is committed to, for example, loving kindness and non-injury, that way of life creates the space for you to tap into your intuitive wisdom based on how you're living. Same thing is when somebody commits to a way of life of moderation rather than indulgence, or someone commits to a way of life of to be able to perceive accurately and communicate accurately rather than just having emotional reactions, if you will. These ways of life, these character virtues, if you will, create the space for you to download and tap into your intuitive wisdom. And then the other thing that I would say is two other factors is who are you hanging out with? What conversations are you having? The quality of your conversations shapes the quality of your life. Are you listening to boosts like this one? Or, you know, is somebody having conversations that are critical about what isn't happening, if you will? Those conversations cloud your vision. They cloud your reason. They strip you of your power if it's a disempowering conversation. So who are you hanging out with? What conversations are you having? And then what are you fueling your mind? When you know, what are you reading? What events are you attending? I would love to invite everyone who's listening to come to our one-day event and bring your family and bring your kids. I mean, at the last one, we had 2 10-year-olds in there. That's not the graduate. I said the 11-year-old was the graduate of our advanced course, but I'm seeing parents bringing their 10-year-olds to our events, and it's so inspiring. They're the ones raising their hand going, bring me the mic, I have something to say. And it's beautiful to witness. So who are you hanging out with? What are you feeding your mind? What are you reading? And what is your practice, your daily rituals?
Right. It's so important. And when I work with people now, and just for us, for ourselves as our families, I wrote an article last year about, like ratings and reviews and stars and likes. And we have so much information and so many people's opinions and so many people's insight and assumptions coming at us, that if we don't have a practice like that to come back to within ourselves and become still and, listen. And I mean, many times I had to just stop whatever I was doing and say, what do I think? God, I don't even know what I think. I don't even know what I think about this scenario. I'm so busy thinking about what everybody else thinks about it, that I couldn't figure it out. So I love that you say that. We have to have some sort of practice, whatever that might be. It kind of goes into my final question that I had, which was the path of an awakened being, or just improving our awareness, is sometimes challenging, and it's not always easy for people to raise their vibration or evolve while also allowing others to evolve at their own pace. Like sometimes we get on board and we get so excited and we get, like I'm listening to something and I want, my husband to listen. I'm like, this is amazing. It's life altering. And, he might not be in that moment in that same space that I am. So to allow them the space to evolve at their own pace is really important. But do you have any advice for how we can best stand in our own power to listen for supreme guidance if the people around us are not supportive? Because we can be mindful about what we watch and what we listen to and who we hang out with sometimes, but sometimes we live with those people, So do you have any advice for being able to find that within, even if you're in a situation that doesn't really support it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, a few things. The first thing that comes to mind is, what's the first thing you do right before you go to bed, and what's the first thing you do as soon as you wake up? Just to have some really solid practices to set your intention, set your vibration, so you're in that field. If somebody's living with someone, let's say, who's challenging them energetically, how can you set the tone? In the Old Testament, when you look at the original transliteration, the day begins in the evening. So if you look at the book of Genesis, it says it was evening and it was morning, day one. So I'm a strong believer that how we end the day and how we process during our sleep time really sets the stage for that entire next day. So what type of practice can you do to really center your energy, come into a place of stillness, come into a place of clarity, so you go to bed in the most serene, clear, centered space? You'll wake up in that energy field, and you'll have more alignment to be able to navigate the challenges during the day. And then when you have something that comes at you, to practice mindfulness. In other words, if you're in an environment that's squeezing you, I'm going to invite you to get very curious. What is the gift in that? What is there for you to learn from that experience that is going to support your evolution? There may be an amazing gift in that very thing, that the universe has brought you that particular perspective for your growth that you would never have in the absence of that. And I know sometimes that's difficult for some people to perceive, because they're looking at their situation and going, man, is this just my lot in life? Is this what I've got to deal with? But when you can become more present to the value or the quality that is seeking to express itself through you, rather than the problem that's happening, you become more present to the evolutionary quality that's seeking to express than to the problem, that becomes your doorway to evolution.
I love that. And that reminds me of I'm listening to Dr. Wayne Dyer once. I remember him saying, whatever's the last thing that you think about or watch or see or talk about before you go to bed, you're basically marinating in that all night long. So
in it.
Yeah, so be very mindful about what's the very last thing that goes in. Well, I've so enjoyed our time together. I honestly feel like I could talk to you forever. There's so many things to talk about and get excited about. And I just really appreciate you sharing your time with us today. And
I do too.
It's been wonderful. And I wanted to just tell our audience that you have kindly offered our amazing listeners a wonderful gift about communication and communicating effectively and authentically, with the most important people in your life. So you can actually go to our website and find out more about that. And I'll actually have everything about supremeinfluence.com and your website, NiarkaInc.com, to learn more about how to communicate from a place of supreme influence.
Yes.
And if I could also just to recommend this book, sometimes it's funny because it's a little heavy, and sometimes I just have it in my purse, and then I can't carry my purse because it's too heavy, so I tell my husband, can you carry my purse? But it has this big book in it. It feels good just to have it around anyway. It has really, really good energy. So I would recommend...
Come to our one-day event so I can have a chance to see all of you in person, which would be great.
Yes, we'll have information about all your one-day events as well, and links to everything. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much, Neerka.
Lots of love.
Namaste to you.
Namaste.